we can accomplish anything. It's not just woo-woo anymore. It's science.
You're listening to the Happy Doc Student Podcast, a podcast dedicated to providing clarity to the often mysterious doctoral process. Do you feel like you're losing your mind? Let me and my guests show you how to put more joy in your journey and graduate with your sanity, health, and relationships intact. I'm your host, Dr. Heather Frederick, and this is episode 5. Just a quick note, we did record this as a YouTube as well as a podcast. If you're interested in viewing it that way, I will have details in the show notes. In this episode, I'm asking you to bring your open and curious mind while I have a conversation with Maureen St. Germain. This woman has had a profound impact on how I experience reality. You know, when my teenage daughters and I moved from California to Arizona just a few years ago, we downsized and everything we owned fit into a moving van, not a moving truck, a moving van. And my extensive book collection was whittled down to 11 books by just 5 authors: Dr. Bruce Lipton, Louise Hay, Eckhart Tolle, Barbara Messiniak, and today's guest, Maureen St. Germain. In fact, 3 of those 11 books were hers. And last night I was reflecting on why are these books so precious to me? And I'm going to try to articulate it the best I can, but I believe it's because she has a way of analyzing and synthesizing complex ideas and then distilling them into these understandable paradigms, which is exactly what you are being asked to do when you're writing your dissertation, right? But it doesn't stop there. She actually tells you what to do with this information. My favorite feedback on a student paper, when it's brilliant and it comes to me and I think this is excellent, I love the way you're thinking, but so what? What do we do with this? And I'm sure this is how she earned her title as the practical mystic, because all of her books give you tools, techniques, examples of how you can actually take this fascinating information, these paradigms, and use them in your life. So before we dive in, let me tell you a little bit more about Maureen. She's an internationally recognized, highly acclaimed transformational teacher and author. She's taught in 24 countries throughout Europe, Canada, USA, Egypt, China, and Japan, including workshops at Kripalu and Omega Institute. Her books have been translated into Russian, Italian, and Chinese. Her book, Waking Up in 5D, was named 2018's best-selling book of the year by independent booksellers across America, and it was actually through that book that I came to know Maureen. Her latest book, Opening the Akashic Records, is a simple and precise manual for accessing the Akashic Records. And Maureen's passion is supporting individuals in both their personal expansion and spiritual awakening. And those are 2 things on offer to explore during a doctoral program. I am so excited to welcome her to today's show. We were talking about the show, figuring out what would be some of the best things to chat about, because there's just so much. And Maureen's got something really special for you today in terms of manifesting your heart's desire to completing this degree. So welcome, Maureen.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. What a great intro. I'm very honored that I was, like 1/3 of your collection. That's amazing. So hats off to you on a beautiful intro. Thank you. I chose this background because I wanted this to be very calming. And we played around with what we might use as a background, but I have a feeling that you're going to want to watch this episode over and over again. So when I was talking with Heather before we started to record, I asked her if she would be willing to play with me and I would demo how you can manifest your heart's desire. And this is a process that is quite well detailed in the book, Be a Genie. And it is based on a lot of mathematical principles, believe it or not. There's a lot of math in it. Now, what I did is I put the science and the math in the back. It was originally in the front because I like the proof first, and then the storyline and the action steps second. But everybody, book editor, everybody said, put that stuff second. Most people are scared off by numbers. So I happen to love numbers, and believe me, that doesn't mean I balance my checkbook. It means I love numbers. Okay, so Heather, what is the biggest dream you can imagine for this podcast?
The biggest dream I have for this podcast would be reaching as much of this population as possible.
And what's the number?
It's anywhere between 2 and 17 million doctoral students
on their PhDs, okay,
that are working on their PhDs or their applied doctorates, and the faculty who support them. Also, it could be their family members and friends who want to support them in learning more about the process. So I know it's a big, vague number, but I guess my biggest 2 to 17 million.
Okay, so let's say you have 15 million listeners.
That would be awesome. Yes, that would be a wild dream for sure.
Okay, so pretend with me right now that you have crossed that number. And somebody on your staff says to you, oh, I was looking at the YouTube channel and you've had over 15 million members or 15 million listeners.
I can feel an energy radiating out through my chest.
Mm-hmm. And I saw you drop into your body. It was like you were up here a little bit, and then all of a sudden you just went, boom, Okay, so here we go. Here's the rest of it. Okay, now you have to pick someone that you are likely to talk to, that maybe you don't talk to all the time, but when you talk to them, it's just like nothing, no time went by. Somebody that's close to you. Who would that be?
That'll be my friend Kim.
Okay, so I want you to imagine you're talking to Kim. Are you on the phone or in person?
Phone.
Okay, so you get on the phone with Kim and she says to you, hey, what's going on? I haven't talked to you in months. I think it's been close to a year. And you say,
remember when I told you about that podcast that I wanted to launch in 2021? I just passed 15 million listeners.
And what would Kim say? That's fantastic.
Yeah, she'd say, I knew it.
I knew you'd do it.
She'd say something like that. I'm not surprised.
There you go. Okay, I'm not surprised. I like that. Now, all of you who are watching, can you see the energy radiating from her? It's just that simple. Okay, so now that's the movie of the mind you're going to use. So I want you to continue the conversation. She says, oh, I'm not surprised knowing you. And what do you do?
What do I do? I guess I would start talking about what's next.
I think you'd start to laugh and take it in.
I'm definitely smiling really, really huge right now. For those of you who are listening and not watching, it's the biggest smile I've had on my face in a long time. Probably since you agreed to be on this podcast.
Well, I'm triply honored that you asked me to be first and I was available to do it, and we just made it happen. I did check in and I got everything you said about yourself. So I was very intrigued, but my higher self said, let's do it. Okay, so after you have a good giggle, she's going to ask you a question. So how is your life new and different?
How is my life new and different? It's definitely awesome to spend all my waking hours doing things that just feel like fun.
Okay, now everyone watch her. She's shaking her head no as she says everything's going to be really fun.
Oh, interesting.
Don't cut that part. It's really important.
Okay.
It's a colloquial thing that we all do, and we have to consciously undo it. We've been trained to shake our head. No, it's too big. It's too big. I can't believe it. You see, we've been trained to do that. So we're sending the message, yeah, but I'm not really sure.
That's fascinating.
I saw you own it. So now we're going to do it again.
Okay.
And what I want you to do is identify, you did great as far as identifying your time is really focused on helping people. I'm going to say that we'll play for a minute. You be me and you ask me that same question and I'll be you and I'll show you what we're looking for.
Okay. How is your life new and different?
Now that
you've accomplished this goal.
Well, now that I have 15 million viewers, the first thing I want to say is I have learned so much from this process that even if I didn't have all these people watching, I would be so filled with knowledge and resources. I would be so grateful. Secondly, I have helped so many people, and I get so much mail in my inbox or on my comment section that tell me how much I have helped them, to step up and to step into their power center. And third, my family's really proud of me. And I'm proud of me.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the movie of the mind. And you want to hear yourself say your story. Now, this is your story according to Maureen, but you may have, nuances or change it, whatever. But it's all focused on, now that I have 15K followers, what's new and different? My bank account's always in the black. It could be any number of things, but don't focus on any one thing. Just kind of feel what it feels like in the field. And another thing that happens, and this is very cool, you do this little movie of the mind as often as you think of it. Every day, you could do it 2 or 3 times, like the first couple of months, you may be doing it a long time. When you go to bed at night, say to yourself, and if you share a bed with someone, you might say, okay, I want you to help me think about this. Now that I have 15 million rather, followers, how does it feel? And if that's the last thing you feel when you go to bed, it sets the tone for your dream time and the energy that comes in to support you. Okay. So you mentally run that movie of the mind, okay? Now, over time, you'll forget to do it. And that means the universe is working on it. Sometimes when you do the mental conversation, you say, she says, you say, and take it further than just, I'm not surprised. And you giggle and say, yeah, it's pretty fantastic. I've learned so much. And she might say, yeah, I bet you have. Tell me something you've learned. You see, like that, you're going to have a conversation, a real-time conversation in your head. Now, the mind cannot tell the difference between a real-time conversation and an imagined one. We all know this. There's lots of research out there to establish that. In one example from about 25 or so years ago, there was a study done with Russian basketball players who were pretty much the same level, and they had 3 groups. One that did no change in their practice schedule. The second group added a half an hour of shooting hoops at the foul line. And the third one added a half an hour of pretending they were practicing at the foul line. So they were mentally doing a mental gymnastics. There was no increase, of course, in the first group. That would be expected. The second group who worked at the foul line, they increased their shooting percentage 25%. The third group, who did not stand at the foul line but pretended that they did, increased their shooting average 23%. So there's almost no difference between something that's really happened and something that you're imagining. And when you add emotion to it, it almost locks it in. And that's why you want to ask yourself, how does it feel now that I have blah, 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 whatever it is that you're trying to achieve? The second thing that's so important in this method, that's called the Genie method, is the conversation. And the reason for that is when it's in your mind, you still wrap it in what I will call pretend, or you wrap it in possible future. But when you have a conversation with someone, your mind sees it as real. So that mental conversation that you have, you're not having a conversation in real time with that friend, but you're mentally replaying a conversation that you would have. Okay. So what that does is anchors it to here. Otherwise, it could be out there in some other version of the timeline, you see, where you didn't do it. So you want to anchor it to here. And when you hear them validate your experience, it literally anchors it as a reality. And then it becomes like a lighthouse, or a tractor beam is probably a better example. So the big ship, the mothership, is holding the outcome, and you're in this little ship, and that tractor beam latches onto you, and your course is already charted for you. And so what I want to say here is that when you light up something in possible futures that could happen, and you light it up with a real-time conversation, you anchor it to you, and you also make that future version real. Because all those future versions could exist, but they don't exist until something happens to make them exist. It's a little bit like the metaphor of setting up a trust fund for a child so that they will go to college. And if you put some parameters into that trust fund that say, you can have the money that we've put aside for you, the 100K or whatever it is, for anything you want when you turn 50. But if you go to college, you can use it for any college expense you've got, and you can have the rest of it when you graduate. What are the odds that that person, that young child, is going to end up going to college? Pretty high. And that's what this does. This kind of sets the tractor beam onto your destination, and you get shown choices. But the easy choice, the ideal choice, is the one that's going to take you closer and closer to that outcome. And it causes the universe to set up examples and situations that make it easy for it to happen.
So Maureen, let me just ask a little follow-up here. So I've heard faculty all the time say to students, just imagine, you're walking across the stage and you're getting that diploma, or imagine where you'll be a couple years post. I've even heard, and how would it feel? But this idea of having a conversation to anchor it to the now is really unique and something I have never practiced myself. And I'm so excited to do this movie of the mind where you're picking someone and having this conversation and digging deep. Do you usually recommend an amount of time, like, hey, do it for at least 5 minutes, or is that just kind of up to the person?
It's up to the person. What happens is the conversation takes on a life of its own, and that's the second tell that it's out there working. And the tell is when, let's say, you're having this conversation. What was your friend's name?
Kim.
So you're having this conversation with Kim, and she says something that you had not scripted. You had not put it in your mental script. That's when it's already in the field, anchored in, and you don't have to worry about it anymore. It's done. Because the universe is showing you what's really happening out there in that other version of the reality, because the other version of the reality is the future, you see. And a lot of people don't realize that the only real thing is here and now, and that future is a potential. But when you enliven it with that conversation, you make it real. Now, as far as going across the stage and, catching the diploma, or, holding, throwing your cap up in the air, whatever, one of those things, and imagining how it feels. The problem with that is that I have proven that you really need to go out beyond that. And the reason for that is because I go to the math, and the math explains why you take two things together and you throw them together and you produce an outcome. Now, I want to explain this a little more deeply for those of you who are into the math. So stay with me and interrupt me if I go too fast, okay? A lot of people know about factoring, and factoring is where you add one number to the previous number, okay? And if you do that in a sequence, it's called a logarithmic spiral. Now, a lot of people have heard this term called the Fibonacci sequence. And the Fibonacci sequence is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. And if you look closely at that, you can see the 5 is the summation of 5, the number that's being called out, and the previous number 3, which produces the number following. So what I figured out is that those numbers all produce the golden mean. And the golden mean is, this is a pretty standard piece of information of people who study this stuff. So the golden mean is that magic number that shows the relationship between the forehead and the middle eye here, the third eye, and the chin, or it's the length between your little finger and your wrist, okay? So this relationship called phi, or the golden mean, the Great Pyramid holds this relationship. All the buildings at the Parthenon hold this relationship. Washington, D.C. was built this way. Architects know it. Artists know it. You can't find a design in a carpet that doesn't have that already built in, because it's a known fact that this is the preferred relationship, in other words, of long and short. What's very interesting is they've even done studies where they show the rectangle that's a double square, and then they shorten it till it gets to a square. And there's a spot in between the double square and the one square that's the exact phi ratio. It's 1.618, or about two-thirds bigger than the original square. That's the ratio that everyone loves. Now, why do they love it? It's been proven that that's what they would prefer. But it turns out that's how we're made. Okay, I've described the bones, but even the DNA show this ratio. Now, one of the things that is not widely known that I figured out is that you can take any two numbers and add them together like this sequence and produce that same relationship of 1.618. In other words, when you take the Fibonacci sequence out to, 5, 8, 21, 34, 55, 21 and 55 divided in each other will produce 1.619, for example. So any two adjacent pair in that sequence produces that ratio. The higher up you go, the more precise it gets to phi. Now, phi is an irrational number, so it's always going to have a tail. It's always going to have a little something left over. And that's why it's called irrational, because it can never settle down. Okay. Well, I figured out that you could take any two numbers and add them together and produce the golden mean on the 9th and 10th iteration. So no matter what two numbers you start with, you could start with 5 and 2000, add them together in a sequence. The first two numbers, 5 and 2000, would be 2005. And then you would add 2005 and 2000. That would be 4005. Okay, doing it that way, sequencing it. Okay, the 9th number and the 10th number divided into each other will always produce 1.618. It's absolutely amazing. And I love to play this game when I teach the class, because I'll tell them, you pick a number, and then we add them out loud, and then we count how many times did we draw that line, and you're counting the number of lines. So it's actually the 10th and the 11th number, because the 9th and 10th iteration of that sequence. Okay, so now you've got this thing called the golden mean, or a 1.618. Well, if you think about it, if you can take any two numbers to produce phi, then what you're going to do is imagine that you're taking the equivalent of today, where I'm at now, and where I want to be, that's in the middle. And where I'm going to be after I've achieved this outcome is over here. So now we have a distance between you are here and our location that we choose to go to that's after our event has occurred. Now, the reason you do that is because the outside event and the today will automatically congeal to produce the desired outcome. So the reason you go far out is so that you will create from the mathematics that the universe uses. So you're riding the surf in the direction you want to go.
Okay, wow. So you're bracketing, you're realizing where you are, going out to where you plan to be far in the future, so that you have this like synergistic, allowing the universe and the natural way of the world to come together to manifest that desire.
The thing to do to really kind of drive this home is to start with any two numbers and add them in a line. You just take time to do that one thing, and you'll see in your eyes, oh my gosh, any two numbers, any starting point, and any other outcome. So if my starting point is where I'm at, and my goal is that diploma, then I'm going to end up in the middle of it. Do you see? It's a lot harder to manifest there. So you want to manifest so that the diploma is in the middle of it and not on the outer edge.
Right.
If you make that the goal, you've missed the mark.
Wow.
Yeah, it's huge.
That's huge. That's really, really big.
And because the mathematics supports it, the conscious mind no longer has to dismiss. Like a woman who wants to get married might say, well, there aren't that many good men around. And my joke is, yeah, well, you only need one, and the idea that you couldn't manifest this is crazy, because I have, and lots of other people have as well. I'll bet if we started surveying, couples that have been together for a while, and start asking, did either one of you manifest your partner? you're gonna see a big percentage of people say, yeah, actually I did. And it's because they had created the attraction factor that would bring that person in. Now, this is really useful, because what I do is then I take the science. Okay, what we do when we think about what we want is we look at the obstacles in front of us and we think, yeah, right, mission impossible. Or, gosh, I'm afraid, I'm not going to do it. Like a term paper deadline. How can I even think about what I'm going to do after I got a diploma when I can't even get this term paper done? And the answer is focus on the biggest outcome you can find. Now, how did I figure this out? This is a very cool story. I have 4 sons, and I was in a very difficult situation as my soon-to-be ex-husband filed bankruptcy, naming me as his creditor, which meant our family debt, which was substantial, fell on me. And not counting the house payment, we owed over $50K to the world. And that's pretty common among families, when you have big families and stuff. So that all fell on me. Now, I did have a choice. I could file bankruptcy with him, and there's no law against bankruptcy. So anybody who's out there, please don't think I'm claiming superiority here over bankruptcy, but I knew I wanted to teach manifestation, and I did not want to file bankruptcy. So I chose to pay it off. Now, initially, what I was trying to do was put the first one to go to college in to this amazing school that the tuition was like $40K a year. And that goes back 20 years. And I didn't have the money to do it. But I encouraged him to apply for wherever he wanted to go. And then he applied for scholarships. And he got a scholarship for all but $10K. And even that $10K a year was a $10K a year was a lot for me, and would certainly put me over my budget. So I worked on the first payment that was due, and I manifested that $10K. And when I got the first letter from the school, and they said, just send us, you didn't send us the $10K that's due, so just send us $1,000 a month for the rest of the year, and we'll just take a payment plan. And I remember throwing that paper away thinking, well, that's not going to happen. I don't have an extra $1,000 a month. It's not going to happen. And I just threw it away. I didn't even think about it. And so I kept working on manifesting, the bill, the first $5,000 for the first semester. I got it paid. And at the end of the semester, after I paid it, I thought, that was way too much work. I do not want to do this 7 more times. So I said to myself, okay, what is it that I really want? And what I really wanted was him to graduate. And that would mean you can't go through a graduation ceremony if you haven't paid your bills. You can't register for the second semester unless you've paid your bills. Okay. So then I went to the big picture, and I was so terrified that I would fail. So terrified that I would fail. I could not conjure a picture of him graduating. That's how scared I was. Because some months I couldn't even make the utility bill. I was making $40K a year at the time, but I couldn't cover everything because of the debt that I had taken on. Okay. So I thought to myself, okay, if I can't imagine him in the cap and gown, what am I going to do? And I remembered that I had a photograph of his high school graduation. So I put it on my desk. And sometimes I can't say this without tearing up, so bear with me. I put the picture on my desk of him in his cap and gown. And I pretended to talk to him, talking to this picture. And I said, there were some scary moments, but it wasn't that hard. Initially, I didn't believe it. Initially, I was terrified. I couldn't even go to belief because there was so much fear in me. But the more I did it, the more natural it became, till I finally believed it could do it. And I did do it. I did achieve that goal. I did pay off the family debt, and have gradually become, in a place where I feel very good about my finances. So when you are faced with what you think is mission impossible, and you don't know how you're ever going to pull it off, go to something that you have succeeded in. So another example, in a class I taught, a woman wanted a beautiful bar mitzvah for her son, and she was terrified that she wouldn't be able to do it. She went to one synagogue, her husband went to another. She didn't have that many friends. They'd moved to a new city, blah, blah, blah. She had her reasons to doubt that this would not be a good party. So I asked her to think back in time to the last time she threw a really nice party that was well attended and blah, blah, blah. We kept going back in time till we got to her wedding. And I said, so how was your wedding? Oh, it was fantastic. How was the food? It was great. The band? Awesome. Your dress? Oh, I was so happy with my dress. What about the guests? Did everybody come? Oh, everybody came. Every single thing about that event was perfect. I said, okay, it's the day after your wedding. How do you feel? I'm still blissed out. Everything just was perfect. Now jump. It's the day after the bar mitzvah and everything went perfect.
So taking time to dig deep and find something similar and giving your body the chance to go there with you.
So if you have a subject that you're working on and you're just really struggling with, go to a subject in your mind's eye that you did do well and you surprised yourself at how well you did. And it's the day after that and you're feeling pretty good about it. Okay, now it's the day after the exam you're worried about. The stress just drops.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that sometimes people are resistant to try these techniques because it almost sounds too simple? I mean, there's a formula here. There's a formula to follow. But do you think people go, oh, well, that's not going to manifest my husband or get me this degree or get me the bar mitzvah? Really just playing a movie in my mind?
I have all kinds of science to back up what I'm saying. So you have to read the book, Be a Genie. I can tell all of the audience, I've been teaching this kind of work for over 20 years. I'm a wealthy woman. I have so many resources today that I didn't have 20 years ago when I started this work. This is my fourth career. When my marriage ended and everything fell apart, I basically lost everything. Just to give you an idea of how broke I was, after my youngest son finished high school, and they're now all in college, I sold my house at a loss and went to closing with a $10,000 check from my resources, and half of that was a credit card advance money I didn't even have, but I couldn't close on the house without it. So I didn't even make any money on my house. And that was a whole nother, big thing. I had been paying on my house, thinking that would be my retirement. And then as my business started to grow, I had a big debt at one point with one of the credit card companies, and they came down hard on me, and I got scared and took a second loan on my house. And that turned out to be one of those predator lending things where they give you the money, but then they have a prepayment penalty. And when I sold the house less than 2 years later, they got an extra $10K out of it. That was my margin. So, all kinds of things happen. And, at any point I could have, I suppose, thrown in the towel, said, I can't do that. But I know two things. Money is energy and money is love. And when we recognize that, we can accomplish anything. And when we open our hearts, we can accomplish anything. So it's not just woo-woo anymore. It's science. And so there's a lot of science in this book that helps people really get it. And it's kind of a fun title, Be a Genie, and picture. And I imagine this will get re-released one of these days because my book publisher really likes my work, obviously. But what I know is that what we think we know and what we know are two different things. I worked in the corporate world. When I worked in the corporate world, I used my tools to manifest so much. I was the director of development of a nonprofit. And so my job was to bring in money and bring in donors. And I increased the donor base 100-fold in 4 years' time. There's no way a person can do that without using these extra tools to kind of pull it in.
And these are tools we were given, but we're not taught in the standard educational system. And what I'm hearing you say, and also I know my personal experience, and what I will say to people is, try it. What do you have to lose, right? Try it and let the evidence come to you. Be your own experiment, sample N of 1, do the protocol, and see what happens. Collect the data.
That's one of the things that I really do is I emphasize the protocol. I give people very precise instructions. If you follow the protocol that I give you, you're gonna get what I'm promising. And this is also true of the higher self connection. Now, this takes me to something else that's really wild. And I don't know how your time is. Maybe we should put this off to another show on how to pass a test.
Oh, yeah. If you would be willing, we will record that in the future and get listeners back, because we were talking about this right before we started, that you're re-releasing. And oh my goodness, this book I love it. I love you. Even note the date. You're going to do this for so many days. It's so my style of learning, where I say, don't just suggest things, but give me step 1, step 2. I want to know. I love my homework. Do you want to share about that book?
Yes. So this book is called Beyond the Flower of Life. And I'm going to tell you a bunch of things, and then I'm going to talk about the protocol, and then we'll wind up. So this book is called Beyond the Flower of Life. And one of the things I did is I took the sticker from one of the previous books when it did win Book of the Year, okay, and stuck it on here as my reminder that I'm bringing that energy in to be another Book of the Year. Now, this is a re-release of a book that I wrote 15 years ago that is selling so well still. I personally self-published this. And when we sold like 9,500 copies, it's probably at 10,000. That's how many we printed. And there was an overprint, but anyway, around 10,000 copies were sold. We approached the publisher that had published my other 2 books and said, you want to re-release this? And then we went through, a year's worth of rewrites, and it's coming out in April 19 of 2021. So it is a new version of the same book. Now, in this book, I have so many protocols, but one of them, it's very, very powerful, is how to connect with your higher self. And your higher self is a version of you that is plugged into the reality in a bigger way than you are. And it doesn't have the blinders on that you and I have on. And so it's a resource. It's like a really awesome executive assistant that does all this research for you and shows up and gives you information. And I want to save that for another show so people will come back and hear me again. And it's step by step. But one of the things that Heather was referring to is the fact that I actually say, to start out with, you're going to do this for 6 weeks. So note today's date. And now let's figure out, when is 6 weeks? So if today is January 1, you're going to do this until February 15th. And you do the math to make sure you know when your end date is, because it's easier to march towards a goal than it is to think back. Now, when did I start this? When did I take that class? Like that.
Yeah. And the higher self stuff, I can't tell you how many times I wish I could just assume with the students that I'm working with, they had this connection. I'd say, just check in with your higher self. If you could just check in with your higher self, all this mystery, all these, all this confusion that you have, all this angst over the feedback that you're getting and how to address it would be so clear that it's there. It's just the channel's fuzzy. There's a way to clarify it. So I'd love to have you back to teach that protocol, because it's this relationship that will change every decision you make going forward.
I'll give you a teaser, and then we'll close with one tool that I'd like to share with your audience. The teaser is, because I worked as a fundraiser, I wanted to get certified as a fundraising executive. And that's like getting your license to sell socks, because you actually are promoting the use of financial instruments for your client. So it's a pretty rigorous test, like any really professional designation. I also wanted to get certified as a nonprofit administrator, and that had been a longer goal. So I decided to do both certifications in 1 year. Everyone thought I was crazy, but I figured if I'm going to study, may as well just study both of them at the same time. Okay. When there were questions that I didn't know the answer to, I asked my higher self. And again, we're going to show how that works. But the funniest thing that happened after I got my certificate, and I did pass on the first fly, and a lot of people don't, just like the bar exam, sometimes have to take it twice. The head of the Red Cross, who was probably making 3 times what I was making, marched into the, nonprofits fundraisers meeting in my community, marched up to me, pointed her finger at me and said, "How did you pass that test on the first try?" And all I could do was laugh.
You didn't give her your secret.
That's another secret. You only give secrets when people ask. And
twice.
They have to ask twice.
Unless they have to ask twice.
Yeah, twice. All right, so here's my parting wish for everyone. And this is something you can do every day that'll greatly improve your life and really de-stress your life without you doing anything else. And that is to pray or say to source or whatever you believe in, I'm asking for a day of heaven on earth for me and everyone I come in contact with. Very simple.
It's so simple. And that was one of my favorite things. Before my feet even hit the floor, what a great thing to say. And it's not just for you. It's claiming this day of heaven on earth for you and everyone you come in contact with. And it just sets the stage.
Mm-hmm. And it does. It does make everything so much nicer.
Okay, so Maureen, obviously we've got lots of goodies for the future. I want everyone to know you can connect with Maureen at her website, MaureenSt.Germain.com. I'll have this in the show notes. You definitely want to sign up for her email list. There are very few people I allow in my email inbox. Maureen is one of them. About once a month, you send out a newsletter with a free meditation, correct?
That is correct. And then those meditations go for sale. A lot of times they're in beta form so that I can, trial them out and get feedback from people. And I do reach out to that group and say, can you give me some feedback so I can use that to sell this product or something like that. So you get to be one of my testers and get it.
Yeah, it's like you're in the inner circle. And then you do have things on Spotify as well, that if people wanted to check those out, my favorite is the Rainbow Angel Meditation, is one of my all-time favorites. You're on social media. You have a Facebook page as well. So lots of ways for people to connect. Maureen, until next time, thank you again so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you on the next episode. Until then, give the movie in your mind technique a try and let me know how it goes. The Happy Doc Student Podcast is brought to you by expandyourhappy.com, and you can learn more there.